Self-disclosure is now a smarter compliance strategy. Most compliance programs are built to respond. A violation surfaces, a notice arrives, and the organization mobilizes. That model made sense when enforcement moved slowly and correction windows were generous. It is making a lot less sense right now. Enforcement agencies at both the federal and state level have tightened the timeline between initial violation and formal penalty. The organizations that are coming out of that environment in better shape are not the ones with the cleanest records. They are the ones with the internal capacity to find their own problems first and report them before an inspector does. That shift from reactive to proactive is not just a philosophical preference anymore. It is a financial one. What self-disclosure actually offers. The EPA's audit policy has offered meaningful incentive for voluntary disclosure for years. Organizations that identify, report, and correct violations under the policy can receive significant penalty reductions and, in some cases, avoid penalties entirely. OSHA's self-disclosure frameworks operate similarly, with agencies consistently treating proactive reporters more favorably than those whose violations surface externally. What has changed in 2026 is the cost gap between those two paths. As enforcement timelines have compressed and penalty structures have grown, the financial difference between self-disclosing and getting caught is wider than it has been in recent memory. For EHS and compliance leaders making the case internally for proactive compliance investment, that gap is now a real budget conversation. The capacity problem nobody is accounting for. Here is where the strategy gets complicated. Self-disclosure sounds straightforward on paper. In practice, it requires something that a lot of organizations are quietly running short on right now: the internal capacity to actually find the problem before enforcement does. The ASSP's 2026 Corporate Listening Tour report, which engaged EHS executives and compliance leaders across every sector, found that new employees in high-hazard environments typically take up to a year and a half to reach the compliance proficiency of a seasoned worker. During that window, the likelihood of missing a facility-specific nuance, an emerging exposure, or a documentation gap that a veteran would have caught is significantly higher. The report was direct about what this means at the organizational level. Knowledge transfer, mentoring, and what the ASSP calls safety IQ are eroding faster than traditional training programs can compensate for. The workforce, the report concluded, remains the primary constraint on safety performance. Chet Brandon, Senior Director of Global EHS at Hexion, put it plainly in the report. There's not a lot of us left in the business. The things I learned the hard way are still up here in my head, and I teach the younger professionals every day. They're just not getting exposed to that because AI and other modern tools will do it for them. That erosion of institutional knowledge is directly connected to self-disclosure capacity. An organization cannot proactively disclose what its team does not have the experience to identify. A compliance program built on the assumption that experienced staff will catch problems before they escalate needs to honestly assess whether that assumption still holds, given the workforce it actually has today. The promotion readiness problem makes it worse. The ASSP report identified a second pressure point that compounds this directly. Many organizations are promoting workers into EHS leadership roles based on technical skills rather than leadership ability or compliance maturity. Management expectations and actual readiness are frequently out of sync, which leads to communication breakdowns and increased risk at exactly the level where compliance findings need to be escalated. For self-disclosure to work as a strategy, findings need to move up the organization quickly and cleanly. A compliance gap that gets identified at the facility level but stalls because the person responsible for escalating it is not sure of their standing or authority is not actually a self-disclosure win. It is a waiting violation. What a functional self-disclosure program actually requires. The organizations getting this right are not simply telling staff to report problems. They have built the structural conditions that make reporting reliable. That means documented escalation protocols that do not depend on any single person's knowledge or tenure. It means leading indicator tracking that gives compliance teams visibility into emerging exposure before it becomes a recordable violation. It means knowledge transfer processes that are formalized and ongoing, not informal and dependent on whoever happens to be available. And it means internal authority structures where EHS and compliance functions have the standing to surface findings without organizational friction. The ASSP report found that organizations treating labor volatility as a permanent operating reality rather than a temporary disruption consistently perform better on safety and compliance outcomes. The ones struggling are the ones still designing programs around a workforce stability that no longer exists. The decision in front of compliance leaders right now. The enforcement environment in 2026 is not punishing organizations for having compliance gaps. Every organization has compliance gaps. It is punishing organizations that find out about them from an inspector rather than from their own program. For EHS and compliance leaders, the question is not whether self-disclosure is a good idea. The evidence on that has been clear for years. The question is whether the internal systems, staffing depth, and escalation structures are actually in place to make it work. For a lot of organizations, the workforce changes of the last 18 months have created gaps in that infrastructure that have not been fully mapped yet. Now is a reasonable time to map them. The alternative is waiting for enforcement to do it for you. You've been listening to Sustainability Soundbites by Environment and Energy Leader. For partnership opportunities, please reach out to our team.